If I could put one sentence on a billboard for every people pleaser, it would be this: love without limits isn't love, it's leakage. Because some of us aren't so kind. We're just really drained. And we call it ministry. We call it being a good friend. We call it being a good Christian. But if your yes is killing you, your yes needs discipleship. It needs some discipline. Today, we're doing Christian Boundaries 101: what boundaries are, what they aren't, and how to set them without guilt.
Good morning, or good afternoon, or maybe it's evening. It doesn't really matter what time it is, and it doesn't even matter where you are. We want to welcome you to Wholeness Wednesdays. So grab a cup of coffee or tea and join our host, Beatrice Hutchison, as we explore and experience our journey to complete wholeness.
Welcome back to another episode of Wholeness Wednesdays here on Completely Whole, where we pursue wholeness physically, emotionally, spiritually, and financially. And I'm Beatrice Hutchison, if this is your first time here, and I'm glad to have you with us. So if this episode hits home, I want you to do me a favor to please subscribe. Also share it with someone who always finds themselves secretly exhausted. Let's get into it. So, what are boundaries? Let's start simple. A boundary is a loving limit that protects what God has entrusted to you, to me, to us. Your time, your energy, your body, your peace, your family, your calling, and yes, even your finances. A boundary answers three questions: what is mine to manage? What has God given me to manage? And what is not mine to manage? Third question is, what will I do if my boundary is ignored? Because boundaries aren't just wishes, right? Boundaries are decisions with follow through. The key truth here is that a boundary is not something you demand from someone else. It's something you decide for yourself. So instead of saying, you can't talk to me like that, a boundary sounds more like, if you speak to me like that, I'm going to end the conversation and we can try again at another time. That's power, that's peace, and that's maturity. So, what boundaries are not? Let's clear up the biggest confusion. Boundaries they are not punishment. They're not, you hurt me, so I'm going to make you suffer for it. They are, I'm choosing what is healthy and holy for me. I'm choosing what I need for me. Number two is boundaries are not control. If you're trying to make someone act right, that's control, not boundaries. Boundaries don't control others, they govern you. Number three, boundaries are not selfishness. Some people confuse boundaries with being cold or uncaring, but boundaries are what keep you loving from a clean place instead of resentment, right? Keeps you with a pure heart, loving from a pure place. Number four, boundaries are not walls. Walls say nobody gets in. Boundaries, on the other end, say this is how you can be in my life in a healthy way. So it gives you the parameters, makes it disciplined, makes it intentional. Now let's talk about whether or not boundaries are biblical. Let's talk about Christian boundaries specifically, because we've been talking about boundaries in the general sense. But now let's talk about what it means when we talk about Christian boundaries. Some of us struggle because we believe if I set boundaries, I'm not being like Jesus. What would Jesus do? He wouldn't set boundaries. But on the contrary, Christ modeled boundaries constantly. So if you think about, there were times that Jesus withdrew to go rest and to pray, even when people wanted more from him or wanted to do other things, he would withdraw himself. He didn't heal. Another boundary is that he didn't heal everyone in the town. Another one is that he didn't entrust himself to everyone, right? He had the inner circle that he was with the majority of the time, and he did go many places, but he did not entrust himself to everyone. He also asks questions instead of rescuing people automatically. He walked away from crowds trying to control the narrative, right? So we don't think of it in that way because he was so loving and so giving, but he had boundaries all the time. He always had them set around him. He loved fully and he lived with limits. So biblical boundaries, they look a little different. Love with wisdom is a boundary. Compassion with discernment is another. Service without self destruction, not sacrificing yourself completely and totally, giving yourself at your own detriment, serving others. Here's something to remember: love doesn't mean limitless access. You can love someone and still say, "This doesn't work for me." Now let's talk about another part of this, because when we have to set boundaries, because we always feel like, oh, it's the wrong thing to do, when we begin to start to position ourselves to begin to think about putting boundaries in place, we start to feel guilty. So let's explore for a moment why we feel guilty. Let's talk about the guilt, because the guilt is loud. It prevents us from putting those boundaries in place that we so need. If you feel guilty about setting boundaries, it's usually tied to one of these. Either you were trained to earn love by being useful, so boundaries feel like a risk. You think, if I'm not available, will I still be valued? If people don't see that they need me, if because I don't make myself available, will I still be valued? Another reason could be you confuse responsibility with rescue. You feel responsible for other people's emotions, for their outcomes, for their comfort, for their choices. You feel responsible for them. So then you want to rescue them. You're the rescuer all the time. Another reason could be you fear conflict. You'd rather carry the burden rather than just have a conversation that just says, "This doesn't work for me. I can't do this right now." Another reason could be that you spiritualize suffering. You think being drained is proof that you're doing it right. So if you feel exhausted because you allow yourself to suffer physically, spiritually, and then you feel drained as a result of it, you think that's the right thing to do. So that's the proof that you're doing the right thing. But God never asks you to be the Holy Spirit for other people. And being constantly overwhelmed is not the fruit of the Spirit. Boundaries are often the missing link between your faith and your peace. Now let's talk about a boundary formula. What does that look like? So we're going to talk about a 4-step boundary formula. So we want to make it practical. So here's a simple formula that you can follow. So number one is that you want to name the problem. Ask what specifically keeps happening that drains me. So that's going to take some moments of reflection. Some examples of what's draining you could be that people call you late at night. Your family drops things on you at the last minute. Work expects you to respond after your work hours. You keep lending money you can't afford to lose. You keep over explaining yourself to earn permission. So step number 2 is that you need to decide the limit. And number 1, we talked about naming the problem. Now we're going to talk about step 2, which is decide the limit. Make it clear and measurable. An example of this would be I don't take calls after 8 p.m. I need 24 hours notice for plans. You can't just spring things on me. Another would be I respond to work messages between my work hours. So if that's 8 to 4 or 8 to 5 or 9 to 5, whatever it is, that's when I respond to my work messages. Another can be I'm not able to lend money right now. Another is I'm not discussing that topic, right? I'm not going to discuss that at this time. Step number 3 is to communicate it simply. You don't have to over explain about it. You don't have to give any long drawn out explanation or any sermon about it. You don't have to give any of those things. Just communicate it simply. You don't have to talk about it. Do a 10-minute speech and give all your reasons why you made the decision. None of that is required. Keep it short and kind. That wins. Just communicate it clearly. Step number 4, choose the consequence you control. This is the part that people skip. So an example of this would be if they call you late, then you don't answer. You don't have to answer. So if they call late, then you don't answer. If they show up unannounced, this what is me, but you don't answer the door. Or either you answer the door and tell them that you're not available right now. If they keep yelling, if you're having a conversation with someone and they continue to elevate their voice, then you can just let them know, I'm going to end the conversation right now, and we can discuss this at another time when you're calm. If they keep asking for money, you repeat the same sentence and stop debating. You don't have to go into explanations as to why you don't have it. You just don't have it right now. You repeat the same sentence. Don't get involved in a whole back and forth concerning it. Boundaries are built through repetition. That means when you repeat it, that means you're standing firm. That is my decision. I'm standing firm. I'm keeping to it. Now, let's offer you some scripts that you can use today. Things that you could put into place, implement right away. So a couple of scripts that you can literally copy and paste, or you can literally jot down and remember. So here's something that's gentle and firm. That doesn't work for me. I'm not available for that. I can't commit to that right now. I need to think about it. I'll get back to you. And that's when someone is asking something of you that you do not wish to give right now. But now what happens when someone pushes back? So then you respond to them. I hear you, and my answer is still no. I'm still unavailable. I still cannot do that. Or you can say, I understand you're disappointed. I'm still not able to do it. You could also say, I'm not debating this. I've made my decision. And for family and those that are dear to you, you can say, I love you, and I'm not able to do that. I can help in this way, but not in that way. When it comes to work, you can say, I can get that to you by and assign a time to it. You can say, I'm offline after whatever time your work is completed. I'll respond tomorrow. When it comes to money, when people are asking you for money, you can say, I'm not in a position to lend money, or I'm sticking to my financial plan right now. And here's the secret: if your boundary requires a long explanation, it's probably not a boundary. It sends the message that it's open for negotiation. So it seems more like a negotiation. So you want to keep it quick and simple and to the point. All right, now let's do this together. So I put my little handy board again, my little friend that I also used last week, and I just kind of prep the board so you can see. So at the top it just says boundary, and so we're going to answer these three things. Takes us 1 minute, 60 seconds to do. My boundary is because, and if crossed, I will. So my boundary is, because this is something I also struggle with, my boundary is I do not take work calls after 6 p.m. All right, I do not take work calls after 6 p.m. because that time is for family, rest, and me. Right? Because that time is for family, rest, and me. That's me time. That's when family time is important, right? That's the time that I rest after I work. And if that's crossed, what will I do? Right? So I do not take the work calls after 6 p.m. So what happens if someone calls me? If someone calls me, I will not answer and will return the call the next day. And that's real simple. I won't answer if they call. And so, of course, if it's an emergency situation, right? If it's an emergency situation, of course, you have to answer and respond, right? If you work that type of a job where you're on call all the time, or it can be something that comes up as an emergency, that's totally different. But I'm talking about, you have those that will call and just want to chat about work or want to, talk about things that have happened or do some further planning about something, right? That's a boundary that you have to put in place, or else it will happen all the time and you find yourself not stop you won't stop working. So you have to put those boundaries in place. So this is something you could do very quickly. My boundary is whatever it is for you, because, right, have your why as to why that boundary is important and why you have it in place. And then if it's crossed, what will you do? So very simply, that is a boundary. Just that quick. You have a boundary and it's in place and it hits all the points that it needs to. Let me say this clearly. And so we're not talking about not showing love to others, not being there for others, not supporting others, not serving others. Of course, we are not saying that, because that is what we do, right? As servants, as ministers, as Christians, we serve others. That is what we do. But many times, we do it at the detriment of our own selves, of our own health, our own peace, our own stability, our own finances. We will put the needs of others before ours and our families. And so it puts us in a place where we're not being good stewards over what God has given us. And so what we do is, so that everything we have, we want to be good stewards over. And everything that God has given us. I mean, even if we follow Christ's example, He showed us that it was okay to put limits in place. It doesn't mean that you don't love. It doesn't mean that you don't care for. It doesn't mean that you won't serve and that you won't help. But you must put those boundaries in place for yourself so that you have time to replenish, that you have time to rest. You cannot continue to pour from an empty cup where you actually have nothing to pour, right? If your cup is on empty. So you need time to be able to pull back and replenish and recalibrate and all of those things. It's very, very important that you do that. So setting boundaries doesn't mean that you're being mean. It just means that you are implementing self-care practices in your life and that you're doing this for yourself, for your own health. It makes you healthy. It doesn't make you mean. It makes you healthy. And healthy people can love without resentment. What happens is that you continue to give of yourself, and at a point you begin to feel resentful. What about me? Don't they see what it's doing to me? It's not other people's responsibility to make sure that we're okay. It would be wonderful, right? But it's not the responsibility of others. It's our responsibility to make sure that we take care of ourselves. So don't think of it as you're rejecting people. Don't think of it as you are pushing people away, because that's not what it is. But rather, you're protecting your assignment and the things that God has entrusted to you. So, if this episode helped you, do 3 things. We mentioned it in the beginning. Subscribe so you don't miss next week. Comment the word boundary and which area you're working on, whether it's time, family, or work, or money. Please put it in the chat below. Let's keep the conversation going. And then also share with a friend who always says yes to everything and then secretly spirals. So you want to send it to someone you know can use to put up some boundaries and do it in a healthy way. So if you want, I can create a script. This what we talked about today. I can share it. As a matter of fact, I'll just share it in the description below, just so that you can copy it, so that you could do the phrase and just copy it down. You could put it on a piece of paper. I put it on my board just that you saw me do it together with you. But you can just jot it down on a piece of paper, and you can have and leave it by your nightstand, or put it in a notebook or in a journal, and put your boundaries in there and what they, your reason why, because, and then if it's violated, what will I do? So I have enjoyed our time together today. As we often do, we close in a prayer or an affirmation. So today we're going to do an affirmation. So please repeat after me. I am allowed to set loving limits. My no protects my peace and my purpose. I can love people without losing myself. God's wisdom guides my decisions. I choose wholeness, mind, body, spirit, and finances. I am completely whole. Until next time, be made whole.
We thank you for sharing this time with us here at Wholeness Wednesdays. Thank you for joining us to explore and experience this journey to complete wholeness. Please remember that we are only an email away. Your questions and input are welcome via bhutch@CompletelyWhole1.com. See you next time here at Wholeness Wednesdays.